Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 2231. The topic is Q&A, and the title is, What Data Should I Track? There's a lot that goes on whenever we're pursuing a health and fitness related goal. We have what we're doing with nutrition, what we're doing with training, and maybe some lifestyle and recovery management aspects. There could be a lot happening. And when we think about what to track, for me, when I'm deciding that for my clients, so for each client, I actually have individual data that's specific to them, specific to their goals, their emotional, mental needs as well. That would be the right data for us to track, but then there's other data that we don't bother tracking. Deciding on that list with in mind to balance two components. Number one is out of sight, out of mind. So what you don't track, you don't know. So we do need to track the most important things. And we want to balance that on the other end of the spectrum with the awareness that our attention to detail is a finite resource. So we can burn ourselves out if we try to focus on too many things. Also, people can get too confused of which of those things is most important, and then they start tracking and emphasizing one that isn't as important as another. And then the other aspect is they just burn out. So they're tracking so many things, but they have all the chaos of regular life as well, and it just becomes overwhelming and too much. So we want to track enough that we can get the progress and results that we want, but we don't want to track anything more than that. So we're trying to find that balance. Now, is there a perfect answer that's going to be consistent from beginning to end of your goal? Absolutely not. There's probably going to be some evolution along the way as to what becomes more important than what you thought, or what becomes less important than what you thought. So this is not uncommon when clients ask me this. Sometimes they'll ask me ahead of time. So I had one client, for example, recently. They connected something called an Oura Ring to their nutrition tracker, and it uploads a lot of data, and they were asking if that was helpful. There were some helpful components, but then there were definitely some components of it that we don't need to be monitoring or paying attention to or even worrying about, because it's just going to clutter her brain. So we're going to be refining that list and getting it down to really, truly what matters most. What I wanted to do in today's podcast was I kind of went off the top of my head and looked through a couple client things as to what were some common things that we track. I wanted to explain why we track these, but then also sometimes why we don't. And I have a list of 12. So I'm going to rattle through them just to see if it can get your interest. So that way you can hang along and stay with the podcast. And then we'll go back through them individually. So we have training performance in regards to weights, sets, and reps, body weight, body fat percentage, calories, protein, daily distribution of calories and protein, carbs and fats, micronutrients like fiber, sodium, cholesterol, hydration, daily energy and workout energy, sleep, and then kind of an all-around category of tracking devices, and specifically talking about recovery percentage. There are a lot of tracking devices, and the Oura Ring was an example for this client that had a recovery rating, and I do want to touch on that in today's podcast. So now, let's go through these individually. Training performance. Should you track or record the weight you use, the sets you do, the reps and all that? Absolutely. Absolutely 100%. The answer is yes. I'm struggling to think of a case in which I wouldn't. Where I have a client and I'm like, don't bother, tracking what you're doing. Just go into the gym and move things around. In literally the only cases I can think of are like PTSD recovery and like eating disorder recovery. In all other cases, there's so much value and necessity to tracking what you're doing in training, because we need to push our body in order to make adaptations. In order for our body to make changes, it has to feel as though those changes are necessary, and it has to have the material needed to make those changes. Meaning, we can train like a beast. You can kick the body's butt. But if you're not eating enough calories and protein, you're not going to build new tissue structures. You're not going to repair the existing tissue structures that you're breaking down. You're not going to get a nervous system adaptation response. So if we undereat our training stimulus, you can train all you want, but you're not going to see much in regards to progress. This happens a lot. I mean, a lot. Unfortunately, a lot. The one common category for me, for clients that I see this is female trainers, female personal trainers. So over half of my clients are personal trainers. Female personal trainers often struggle with, they want to appear physically fit, lean, petite, all the good stuff on social media. So they tend to undereat. But they love training. They're a personal trainer. They love exercise. They love training. So they tend to exercise ahead or more than their nutritional support. So they end up staying soft, not as muscularly lean. They have this kind of softer, pudgier feel to them than what they think they should, given their activity level and their general interest and knowledge in the topic. So they train like a beast, they know a lot, but they're like, why don't I look that way? Commonly, it's because they undereat. Now, usually it's they undereat during the day and they overeat at night, so we have to kind of switch some of that stuff around. But that would be a case in which somebody's training is outperforming their nutrition and they're not getting the results they want. So we have to make sure we balance that. So when we think about making progress and training being involved in that, we again need to create a stimulus intense enough that forces the body to change, that the body believes a change is necessary, but then we have to have nutritional support for that change. So tracking what we do in the gym, tracking weight, sets, reps, is absolutely necessary, because that way, every time you go to the gym, you can ensure that you're producing a stimulus that will push your body to make adaptations. If you train every time just based on perception of, well, this felt really hard, that is a horrible metric, because our perception of difficulty is not consistent, and it's not reliable. It's not consistent if we got less food, less sleep, more stress at work, more stress at home. We're going to perceive the workout to be harder, even if it's actually less performance-wise, like weight, sets, reps, than it was the week before. If the week before we had better sleep, better food, less stress. And then it's not reliable in the sense that if you don't like doing a certain type of activity, like say I don't like running, but I love lifting weights, I'm going to always perceive running to be miserable, even when I'm warming up. So this is actually common with people with lifting weights, if lifting weights isn't their thing. So they'll be doing some movements, and they're like, oh, gosh, this is already hurting. And I'm like, we haven't even warmed up. Like, what are you talking about? We did 50 pounds more than this last week. Shut up, that kind of thing. It's like, you're fine. So their perception is just unreliable. So we want to be tracking our weights, sets, reps. And typically for my clients, most commonly, I write programs that repeat for 4 weeks. So they'll have the same exercises in the same order, the same targeted rep ranges for 4 weeks. So week 1, we just kind of figure out what in the heck we're doing. Week 2, okay, I have a better idea of what this movement should feel like. Maybe I can try a couple more pounds. Maybe I can try a couple more reps. I can just have a little bit better intensity, a little bit better mind-muscle connection. Week 3, again, we try to push weight or reps. Week 4, it's really hard to push weight or reps, but we do want to try. And then we switch new program in the 5th week. We start over at a week 1 of a new program. What I find is if you stay with a program longer than that, in order for you to make progressions, usually the technique quality has to drop off or the injury risk goes up. So we want to avoid both of those. So changing the program more often helps prevent injury risk, and it helps increase our technical quality in the movements we do. Now, some people will prefer to stay with stuff longer than that. That's totally fine. You can change movements around movements. So when I have powerlifting clients and we want to work on a barbell squat, for example, and really fine-tune our technique, we don't want to only barbell squat for 4 weeks at a time, but we might do different movement preparation drills before the squats. We might be doing different accessories after the squats. So you can change some of the elements, or even just go from a couple weeks of 10 to 14 reps to a couple weeks of 6 to 10 reps. Then you just want to have some modification to it, in which when you're wanting to make weight and rep progressions, that you can do that without sacrificing technique or risking injury. So that would be number one. Training performance, weight, sets, reps, absolutely 99.9% of the time, we're definitely going to track that. Number two, what I have written down is body weight. Now this is fun. I could spend a whole podcast on this, but I'll try to be short. Is body weight is a toss-up. Some people like to track it. Some people absolutely not. When I have people who are used to tracking their body weight and their emotional and mental health hinges on body weight, what I find most commonly is if we don't address body weight, and I'm like, hey, just don't even worry about that, let's not track it at all, we've never healed the issue of body fat being an emotional trigger for them. Like body weight, sorry. So I think I just said body fat like 4 times in a row, but I mean body weight. Body weight is something we want to track because if their emotions are attached to their weight fluctuations, we don't want to ignore that. We want to educate that. We want to learn how to control that. We want to work our way through that problem, not around that problem, just leaving that problem to explode on us later on in life, So I like to do the education component. I had an eating disorder when I was 15, 16, and 17. I was anorexic. I ate less than 1,000 calories a day, and I exercised every single day. I went years of my life exercising every single day. Literally. And I mean the word literally. So I exercised every single day because it was an obsession for me. But at that time, I didn't weigh myself because I didn't have a scale, and I looked in the mirror and I was like, I look like shit. So who cares what I weigh? I just want to look less like shit. But as I got older and I bought a scale and I started getting into college and stuff, I have weighed myself extensively, like every single day for long periods of time. And I've gotten through that to where now body weight is just a data point. It's a data point. It's something else that tells me how things are going along with everything else I'm doing. Training, calories, protein, what am I seeing in the mirror, how do my clothes fit? It's just another data point. What I would like to do with people when they have an emotional sensitivity to body weight is to get them to that same point, just get them to where it's a data point. So we talk about what does this weight scale actually measure. It measures way more than body fat. You're talking about muscle fluctuation, water retention fluctuation, and then daily digestion. Like if you ate food last night and you didn't pass it yet, like you didn't go to the bathroom and get rid of it yet, that's still in you in the morning, so that's still contributing weight. And then if you have a bigger dinner versus a smaller dinner the next morning, you're going to weigh more or weigh less. And that has no indication that you gained fat or lost fat overnight. So the more random our food is, the more random our activity levels are, the more random our sleep, the more random our hydration, the more random our stress, because that changes cortisol, which changes water retention. If any of those things fluctuate, your body weight will fluctuate. So body weight is not a direct measurement of body fat. And the more we can understand that, the more we can accept that, the more that we can just say, hey, this is another data point among the other data points I'm tracking, then that's going to get us emotionally and mentally healthier. So if a person has a mental connection or mental block or emotional relationship with body weight, and they want to overcome that, we absolutely track it. I educate them. We talk about it along the way. Now, let's say that somebody's like, I never want to step on a scale. And whenever we started working together, they're like, hey, I just want to look better, or I want to be stronger. I want to do this, this, and this, but I don't care how much I weigh. Well, then I don't care either. We're never going to step on a scale then. If you don't give a crap, I don't give a crap. So There may be times in which we would, like the person's like, I don't really care what I weigh. And I'm like, well, we got to, check this for like health purposes. I can't even really think of an example, but somebody wanting to get like a gastric bypass surgery, they have to weigh a certain amount to be approved. So maybe their doctor said, hey, you have to lose 50 pounds in the next 3 months, and then that shows that we can do this surgery. Well, then we've got to track that, so that way we know we're on point to get the surgery. So most often, I will track body weight because it is a metric, or it is a data point that we can use. And most often, for most people's goals, weight is at least somewhat related. So if they're a competitive athlete, maybe their sport has weight classes. Well, then we got to weigh ourselves. If they are an aesthetic athlete, and they're like, hey, I just want to get on stage and look lean and mean. Well, if we're starting, say, 20 weeks before the competition, and we know their body fat is too high, we know that they'll likely need to weigh less at the competition. So we would track weight just to make sure our weight is going in that trajectory. So there are almost always times where body weight is helpful, except for when somebody says, I just don't want to do that and it's not important to me. Then I would say, okay, that's fine, let's skip it. Number 3, we have body fat percentage. People will often track their body fat percentage. The most common method that people have access to, like at home or at their gym, is going to be what's called a bioelectrical impedance device. So it sends these little electrical impulses. So you'll see these little silver tabs that you either hold on to or it's under your feet. And it sets this little like electric impulse from one tab to the other, and it goes through your body. To do that, the speed in which that electrical impulse goes through you is correlated via an equation to body fat percentage. I am not a big fan of those. I did teach exercise physiology labs at the university level for 7.5 years, and I taught all the data on this. So bioelectrical impedance devices are not very accurate. They're like plus or minus 3% accuracy if everything is perfect, and no one weighs themselves in the perfect conditions. So I'll come back to that in a second. But plus or minus 3% means it could measure you at 12. You can actually be anywhere from 9 to 15. So when somebody measures themselves a month later and they're like, hey, I lost 0.5% body fat, I don't know if we did, because that's well within the point, like plus or minus 3. So 0.5, were they just a little more dehydrated that day, or were they more hydrated? Did they weigh themselves after a meal or before a meal? Did they weigh them, did they do it, at the beginning of the day, the middle of the day, the end of the day? There's so many variables that factor into the accuracy of bioelectrical impedance devices that I do not believe they are useful. If somebody wants to track them and they find that fun, okay, cool. That's fine. But it's just a data point amongst many other things. I would give more weight to their body weight change, more value to their body weight change. I would give more value to their perception and training. How are they improving? How do they feel when they look in the mirror? I typically am not going to adjust anything in anyone's programming based on the bioelectrical impedance results in regards to body fat percentage. Now, the more accurate methods that I do use with clients is DEXA scans, hydrostatic weighing, or a BOD pod device. A BOD pod device is an air displacement chamber that you get into, and you would have to go to a medical center for this because those things are like $50,000. You would have to get into this air displacement chamber. There is a bioelectrical impedance device scale sold on Amazon called the Body Pod. Absolute bullshit that they're allowed to call that because the BOD pod is an air displacement device. The Body Pod is just a bioelectrical impedance scale that you stand on. There should be some infringement rights issues because people can easily assume that they're equal. So if you hear someone talking about a BOD pod being an amazing standard of measuring body fat percentage, and they go on Amazon and go BOD pod and they see Body Pod, they're going to be like, oh, this is what that person meant. No. So, DEXA scan, hydrostatic weighing, or a BOD pod, which is an air displacement test. It's a big, looks like an egg. It's a big egg that you sit inside like a rocket ship. And those are going to be like the 3 kind of gold standards. Like you can think of like skin fold measurements. You have to do, the practitioner has to do skin fold measurements at least 1,000 times to be considered accurate. and very good luck finding somebody that does that. And those little plastic things you find for free or get with like free protein shakes is not the right calipers for body fat measurements. So for skin fold measurements. So I've done all that. I've done well over 1,000 of those things. So I really don't give weight to any of that. If somebody wants to track it, awesome. Do I track it? No. So I'm not going to. I would take my time and pay for a DEXA scan, a hydrostatic weighing, or a bod pod if I were if it was more important to me. The reason why I say that is I don't really care what my body fat percentage is. I just want to look good and feel good. If it mattered to me, then I would pay to go do a DEXA scan or a hydrostatic weighing or a bod pod about every 3 months. That would be the soonest that I would do it. Typically, I tell clients every 6 months, or if we're doing a certain event and it's a 9-month diet or something, we might do it at the beginning, at the end, something like that. But I typically do not track body fat percentage. If somebody wants to track it, great. Number 4 is calories, always. So we're either tracking calories or they're eating within a few options of meals that we know what the calories are. So I have an example of someone who works on a yacht, and so shout out to them. And their food is regimented every single day. There is no variation. There's not even options for variation because they're on a boat and they don't get like new foods for a certain amount of time. So what we do is we say, hey, what foods are available to you? Let's put together a good breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. And then of these 2 or 3 options per meal, just eat within those options, and that's it. They don't have to track their calories because we already calculated that ahead of time. So if somebody does here, eat this, eat this, eat this, then we don't need to track calories as long as they're staying with those options. But for most clients, we do track calories, at least loosely. So that way, and what I mean by loosely is they're like, well, this is 212 calories. Just call it 200. This is 371 calories. Okay, just call it 350. So we'll be within the ballpark. So almost always all my clients have ranges for calories, meaning they might aim between 1,600 to 2,000 calories a day. On days they feel sluggish, eat closer to 2,000 to get better energy. On days you feel great and you want to push for more fat loss, maybe we eat down towards 1,600. But they'll have a range, and as long as they're in that range, we're fine. I don't care if it's 1,741 or 1,746. Who gives a shit? As long as they're in that range, great. That's enough consistency that we're going to get the results they want. So we do track calories either specific, loosely, or by repeated meal options that have known caloric totals. So we are always tracking calories in some way. That is absolutely important because calories kind of determine the direction of your body weight, meaning if I want my body weight to stay where it is so I can have maximal performance for sports, I want to make sure I'm eating enough calories so my body stays where it is. It's calories that are going to determine that. I can eat the cleanest food in the world, but if I'm under eating, I will lose weight. I can eat the cleanest food in the world, but if I'm overeating, I will gain weight. Food quality is independent of body weight change if you're not controlling the consistency of calories. So again, what you eat doesn't matter if you don't know how much you eat. So we have to track the how much. We have to track our calories in some way, either specifically with food apps, generally by just looking at food nutrition labels and kind of adding it up throughout the day, rounding to the closest 50, or by repeating specific meal options that have known caloric totals. Next, we have protein. Absolutely, we're going to track protein, have some awareness to that. Protein is how our body repairs and rebuilds structures and takes care of stress, everyday damage and stress. And then protein is how we build new structures. So if I want new nervous system connections for greater strength, if I want new muscle tissue for bigger muscles, if I want to heal my connective tissues, if I want to do anything in my body progressively that involves tissues, I'm going to need protein. So again, we track that specifically with a food tracking app. We track that mentally by just adding up stuff throughout the day and rounding to the closest, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever makes sense for your total number. And then, or consistent meal options. So we know, okay, these meal options all have at least 30 to 50 grams of protein. Eat 3 of these options per day. Boom, done. So calories always in some way, protein always in some way. Number 6, we have daily distribution, and that would be how do we distribute our calories and protein throughout the day. I would highly recommend people pay attention to this. I do typically start with just calories and protein per 24 hours, but then it's the second the person has the capacity to, we focus on daily distribution. This is important because the more our distribution wavers, the more variable it is. The more variable we feel and the more variable the results that we get are. The more consistent I can be with when I eat my calories and when I eat my protein from day to day to day to day, the more consistent I'm going to feel throughout the day, the more consistent I'm going to perform in my training, and the more consistent results I will see on the scale and in the mirror. So, daily distribution is not quite an absolute, but the next level. The next level, almost an absolute. I usually tell people to aim to eat more when you move more, eat less when you move less. The more someone does that, the more their food can vary per day, and it has less of a negative impact. If somebody wants to, say, fast during the day and eat more at night, you can do that, but the calorie and protein amount needs to be really dialed in. You 100% need to track that like to the nth detail. The less detailed you are with your calories and protein, but that you have it further away from when you're active. Meaning when you eat calories is different than when you use calories. If you're not super consistent and precise, then you will not see as great of results. So the less you match your intake to your output, the more detailed and regimented you have to be. Most people struggle with detail and like regimentation, whatever that word would be, strictness, I guess, consistency, whatever the heck that word is. Most people struggle with that. So if we just go with a better rule of eat more when you move more, eat less when you move less, they can have more freedom in food choices. They can have more fluctuations per day. They're going to look better and feel better, and overall the progress is going to be a lot better. Next, number 7, we have carbs and fats. I don't track that. There's no predetermined amount of carbs and fats that people need to have every day. In general, you're going to feel better and move better when you eat carbs and you're active. You're going to feel better and you don't really need to worry about moving. If you're not doing stuff, if you're inactive, and you focus more on fats. Fats are a slower digesting energy source. Carbs are a faster digesting energy source. So when I want energy now, I want carbs. When I want energy slowly over the next few hours, I want to lean more into fats. We never need to be exclusive, like carbs only, fats only, but the percentage of carbs and fats in your meal should lean one way or the other, depending on the moment you're having that. Now, the exception to them being exclusive would be post-weight training or immediately prior to weight training. So if somebody's doing weight training, fats are not going to be a great resource for energy, and especially if you eat it right before you work out, because it's just going to be sitting in your belly and you're going to get nothing from it because it takes hours to digest. So carbohydrates, if you're eating immediately before a workout, are much better. And then to replenish energy after workout, carbohydrates are much better because it gets in your system faster. So if you're eating immediately before or immediately after training, carbs are typically going to be a much better choice than fats. Then we have micronutrients like fiber, sodium, cholesterol. Do we ever track those? Very rarely. If somebody's taking a multivitamin supplement and maybe a digestive aid or a probiotics or something like that with it, I almost never track any of these things. We would track fiber if they have a certain digestive condition that would be helpful or harmful. We would track sodium, and if they have a certain health condition, if that's helpful or harmful, or cholesterol if they have a certain condition where it's helpful or harmful. So I helped a friend one time getting into the military, and his cholesterol was too high to get into the military. And they're like, what the hell? You got 30 days to fix this. So he reached out and he's like, what do I do? So we looked at everything he was eating. We reduced his intake of cholesterol, and we reduced his intake of sugar, and that brought everything down. He met the metrics and got into the Army. So that would be a case in which somebody had high cholesterol levels in their blood. We needed an immediate fix. So they were already exercising on a regular basis, so more exercise wasn't going to really help that. But ingesting less cholesterol is definitely going to help. So we brought their cholesterol down. Number 9 is hydration. I will have people track how much fluid they drink if I suspect that they don't drink enough, and or if they definitely tell me that they don't drink enough. It's not uncommon for me to have somebody tell me that they barely have 32 ounces of fluid in a day. That is not enough. The minimum that I usually have people do is half their body weight in ounces. So half their body weight in pounds. So if you're not American, you would take your kilogram weight, multiply that by 2.2, and that should give you pounds. And then you want to have half of that many ounces of fluid a day. If you're hitting at least half your body weight in pounds and ounces of fluid a day, that's kind of like a minimum amount. So if I weigh 200 pounds, I'm going to drink 100 ounces of fluid. I let that be an all fluid thing. So it counts coffee, sodas, diet sodas, drinks, whatever you have throughout the day. That's usually a good aiming point to have as our baseline. Then we try to go above that if we can. The reason why is hydration helps digestion. It reduces bloat. It helps food pass through you so you have better digestion. It also hydrates our muscles. So your muscles are less tight. They're more pliable and they're more ready to go. And it helps us regulate body temperature. So if somebody gets overheated and kind of like they feel like crap during their workouts, if they're more hydrated, they can better regulate their body temperature, and they usually actually perform better and feel better during training. So it's kind of like a case-by-case basis with hydration. Daily energy and workout energy. I do track this for a lot of people because I like to know how they're feeling. And I give them a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is you feel like absolute crap. 3 is so-so, pretty average. 5 is I feel amazing. I like to know because say they start the week at a 5, then in the middle of the week they're at a 3, at the end of the week they're at a 1. Well, maybe we're overtraining or maybe we're under recovering. So we need to look at those metrics to see. I don't want them feeling like crap all the time. Are you going to have a day from, every now and then where you feel like crap? Probably, maybe, sometimes happens. That's normal life. But we don't want that to be a regular thing. And if someone's getting ready for a competition, especially a performance-based competition, I don't want them feeling like crap at all. I want to make sure they're flying high and feeling great going into the competition. So it is a way for me to kind of double check our recovery methods and our training methods and say, are these balancing each other out? So if you find that your daily and workout energy are highly fluctuating, I would maybe track that just to see, okay, when do I feel my lows? You might start to see there's a repeated pattern. Maybe on Mondays you always feel like crap. Well, maybe you're drinking and sleeping like crap on the weekends. So you got to take care of the weekends a little better, and that way you feel better on Monday. You can start to identify trends and then look at other habits of life to say, okay, what might be contributing to that trend? Then we have number 11 is sleep. I do track sleep. I just tell people, hey, make sure you're getting at least a minimum of 6 hours. If you get less than that, just let me know. Or if they're like, hey man, my daily energy is crap, my workout was horrible, I didn't make any progressions in my training, I say, what are your calories and what's your sleep bit? So are you eating what you should and are you sleeping the way you should? Ideally, in a wonderful world, we would get, more sleep the better, 8, 9, 10 hours, especially if somebody's a very aggressive weight training athlete. But regular life, normal people, usually 6 or 7 is a decent baseline. I don't like anybody getting under 6. Actually, even in the 6s, I'm like, hey, do you think you can get into 7? In a perfect world, I would have them be between like 7 and 9 as best as we can. But it's more so a good marker to know if I had a bad day, why? Do I need to change my training? Do I need to change my nutrition? Oh, wait, no, I don't. I just had a crappy night of sleep. And then the last one, we talked about tracking devices, thinking of like the recovery percentage that those devices will say. Well, you're 89% recovered today, or you're 60% recovered today, and like maybe it has a red indicator and it's like, you shouldn't train today, you shouldn't exercise. I have never found those to be accurate to the other data that we're tracking. They have never, ever, ever been, and I've worked with over 3,000 clients. They have never been a good indicator as to whether a person should train or not train, or eat more or eat less, or sleep more or sleep less. Never. That'll hurt some people's feelings because maybe they really anchor that as something important for them. And they're like, well, I never work out if it's less than 60, or I never work out if it's less than 70. Or if I'm always going at 90, that means I'm not training hard enough. I would not anchor what you do based on a tracking devices reading of your quote-unquote recovery percentage. I would track everything else on this list, all 11 other things, before I would give any concern to a recovery percentage on a tracking device. I don't believe it's accurate, considering all the other data points we have and the accuracy that they can offer instead. Okay? So hopefully that was helpful, kind of going through again, what data should I track? If you have any questions, if you want to know about anything else, just shoot me an email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. Tracking this data and then finding the right balance for you. Again, balancing out of sight, out of mind, and then also knowing that attention is a finite detail. We want to track enough, but not too much. This is stuff I help all of my one-on-one clients with. Right now, our one-on-one coaching is $200 a month. I would write a nutrition program specific to your needs, training program specific to your needs. We would communicate every single week, covering all of your questions. And this is the stuff that I teach to all of my clients. So if you would like to have all of that assistance, reach out at our email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. You can also go to our website, www.brutalirongym.com, to check out more about our details and the people I've worked with and more about my history. Awesome. If you need anything, please let me know. If you like the podcast, please share the podcast. The more people we share it with, the more people can help. If you like the podcast, please consider donating to support the podcast because it does have a high hosting cost. You can do a donation on the website, or you can buy your supplements from Nutricost.com, which is where I buy mine. You can use the code BrutalIron10 for a 10% discount, and then we get a 10% commission on anything you buy or purchase, and that's a great way to give back to the podcast indirectly while getting great supplements for yourself. If you like the information we share in the podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.